All right, so we're about a day into the new league year, and the Packers have made a few splash signings by signing running back Josh Jacobs and safety Xavier McKinney. But they also kept a handful of their guys from last year that they wanted to bring back. First off, Keyshawn Nixon, 3-year, $18 million deal, likely looking at keeping him at that slot cornerback kind of role for nickel and, being used as more than just a returner, even though a lot of us think that that slot position is somewhere that we might be able to upgrade. They also re-signed linebacker Christian Welch. No details on that, and the Packers haven't officially announced either the Nixon or Welch re-signings yet. But we did hear reports that Welch will be back as well. The Packers did announce that they re-signed cornerback Corey Ballentine, which was also, he did spot duty with all of the rotation of cornerbacks this past year due to injuries and whatnot. But he's also a core special teamer, as is Welch. And this next guy, Tyler Davis, who unfortunately was out all year with a torn ACL, but they did really like him as, really a leader of that special teams unit in 2022. So not surprised really that we're bringing him back there as well. But what I really wanted to talk about today was the rest of the NFC North and what's going on around there. So the biggest splash is the Minnesota Vikings, essentially losing their starting quarterback in the last several years in Kirk Cousins, who's going down to Atlanta on a 4-year, $180 million deal. Again, cashing in big time on all of his guaranteed money that he's gotten pretty much throughout his career since his rookie deal expired. He was franchise tagged a bunch in Washington. Every deal he had in Minnesota was guaranteed money, like basically fully guaranteed. And this one's not much different. 100 million guaranteed out of that 180 million. So really Atlanta's on a big rise there, but the Vikings have a lot of turnover on their unit. They lost Daniil Hunter, who was, had a career year last year coming off the edge, like 13 and a half or 15 and a half sacks, something along those lines. And then they also lost Marcus Davenport, who was a little bit of a gap signing for them, kind of reclamation project at defensive tackle, a guy who has the talent but hasn't been able to stay healthy to put that talent to use. And they also lost inside linebacker Jordan Hicks so far, who went down to Cleveland. Um, Marcus Davenport also going within the division, heading to Detroit, and Daniil Hunter went to Houston. They did sign a lot of guys, though, Minnesota did. So going down the list, Jonathan Grenard, defensive end or edge rusher out of Houston, who put up some pretty good production last year alongside or opposite Will Anderson Jr., who had a great rookie year down there. Also from Houston, they brought in linebacker Blake Cashman, who was a bit of a kind of middle of the road linebacker for them. Another guy kind of on the outside edge, outside linebacker, Andrew Van Ginkel, who they signed from Miami. Then they got a bridge quarterback here with Sam Darnold and brought in a receiver, Brandon Powell, kind of lower end guys, and then defensive end, Jonathan Bullard as well. And the one that, I haven't mentioned yet that everybody is well aware of if you're a Packers fan is Aaron Jones. Taking only slightly more money than what was on the table in hindsight from the Packers. But obviously, the way that whole transaction went down, the way communication was kind of severed at a certain point, and the two sides just couldn't meet. It obviously was, something that frustrated Aaron Jones because he obviously wanted to retire a Packer and wanted to stay there as long as possible. But he knew that this was likely his last deal that he was going to get in the NFL, and he was not trying to be essentially disrespected by the Packers the way that he was. So moving on to the Detroit Lions, not as active as Minnesota, but they don't really need to be as much either. So they did lose cornerback Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's going back after a year in Detroit to Philadelphia, where he was the season prior. And they lost guard Jonah Jackson, who's heading over to the Rams. So starting guard and starting safety that they're losing there. So a few gaps that they're going to have to fill. But they did, as I mentioned, bring in Marcus Davenport from Minnesota, who did miss time last year as well as he previously had in New Orleans before that. And they signed cornerback Amik Robertson from Vegas. Still a lot of guys that they had that were, you know, going to hit the market. Guys like um, defensive end Romeo Aquara, safety Tracy Walker, uh, another guard, Halapoulivaati Vaitai, Josh Jacobs at receiver. A lot of guys across this roster that are hitting free agency, but it's not necessarily a bunch of the core guys for that team. And I think they're going to be able to retool and fill some of those gaps through the draft. So that'll be interesting to watch as they try to remain atop the NFC North. And then finally, the Chicago Bears. And we'll start by saying nothing so far has happened with Justin Fields to this point. It generally seems as though the NFL is not as high on Justin Fields as obviously Bears fans are, and potentially the Bears organization themselves are. At first, even like Mel Kiper was talking like a top 15 pick potentially being compensation for him. That's obviously not happening. At this point, I'm not sure with all the quarterback moves in free agency if there's even a spot where he would really be a preferred starter out there. He'd probably have to compete for that starting role and, maybe take a spot where he's going to be a backup. For a while we all thought it was going to be Atlanta, but then Kirk Cousins hitting the market kind of changed that narrative. And then I don't know for sure where he's going to end up going. And at this point, maybe the Bears bring him back and they go with him at first so they can give their rookie quarterback that I'm assuming going to take with the first overall pick, probably Caleb Williams, give him a little bit of a runway where he can get his feet under him and they can continue to build that team around him rather than just kind of throwing him to the wolves out there because they've got some spots on their offensive line that they need to shore up. And one of the guys that they ended up losing actually, no. One of the guys that they gained rather was guard Matt Pryor from San Francisco. They also signed Gerald Everett, the tight end from the Chargers, previously of the Rams, and then a couple guys from Philly in running back DeAndre Swift, which I think they overpaid for based on really what his production looks like. The potential payout for him is 2 years, $16.5 million. And then safety Kevin Byard, also coming from Philadelphia, who was traded from the Tennessee Titans last year to Philadelphia midseason. And, overall a quality safety. It seems as though with that move and some of the youth that they have on the outside, whether it's Jaquan Brisker or Tyreek Stevenson, they've got a good bit of their secondary kind of shored up to what they want it to be. I would say on the defensive side of the ball, they're pretty squared away. It's really that offense that's kind of, um, you know, lacking and needs really just that quarterback and to kind of put things together a little bit. They did lose Darnell Mooney, who also went down to Atlanta. It's going to be one of the targets for Kirk Cousins and defensive tackle Justin Jones, who last year, had a whole bunch of shit to talk about the Bears overtaking the Packers with Aaron Rodgers leaving. So, he ate his crow and now he's out of town. But again, they've got a number of guys that are hitting the market as well. Specifically, they got three guards, Cody Whitehair, Lucas Patrick, and Dan Feeney, all who played at least a relatively significant role for them last year because of injuries and whatnot. I think Lucas Patrick was mostly a center for them. But in the interior of that offensive line really needs some attention. They definitely need to shore that up. And then just a few other pieces, like they cut Eddie Jackson. They're losing Yannick Ngakoue, the edge rusher, and Mercedes Lewis, former Packer. I don't know if he's going to retire at this point. I mean, probably isn't far off. He's, I believe, 39 years old coming up this season. So, now after this past season is the longest tenured tight end in NFL's history. He was previously tied with like Tony Gonzalez and a few other guys. So, great work for him. Um, Glad to see that he was able to meet that mark by getting with somebody, even though I would have preferred if he would have been with the Packers last year. But that's kind of a quick update of where the NFC North sits. through free agency. A lot of time left between now and the draft. Several more waves of free agency are going to kind of occur, and we'll see what ends up going on, uh, you know, in the rest of the NFC North and how that affects the way these teams are going to approach the draft in April. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any more of these updates through free agency, combine updates that we had the last couple weeks, prospect primers, things of that nature leading up to the draft. And make sure if you're around this evening, I'm going to go live and we're going to do a live mock draft, 6 weeks out from the NFL draft. So tune in and we'll see you there.